2020, we're going through a global pandemic that affects every aspect of our lives. And recently, we've also witnessed a US election, which is of course more sensational than ever. As everybody's chatting about the candidates, presidential debates, and the latest updates, as one does, I've asked myself the obvious question: who would I vote for if I was American? Suddenly, I realized that I'm really lucky to be able to ask this question to myself. As we all know, women didn't always have the rights that we luckily have today. 117 years ago, in 1903, a woman named Emmeline Pankhurst founded the Women's Social and Political Union, WSPU, in Britain. Pankhurst's main goal was to empower women to fight against gender inequality. She primarily focused on the question, why can't women vote? By vocalizing this, WSPU made thousands of women question the system, which turned into an influential movement of women who are eager to take action about gender inequality. On the other hand, the beginning of this movement infuriated the privileged part of the society. Unlawful arrests gave no other chance for the suffragettes, the frontline activists of WSPU, to adopt a combative approach. The suffragettes chained themselves to the government buildings. They even hunger-struck in prison. These fearless women gave a tough fight for years, and finally, on July 2nd, 1928, after 25 years of protesting, the British Parliament gave every single woman, regardless of their socioeconomic background and age, voting rights. After a few years, the fight spread to several countries, and the agenda of women's rights activists expanded with the civil rights movement. So, the rights of women of color were on the table. Then, the understanding of gender progressed into a broader concept, which is the fact that gender is not binary. Fast forward to now, the fight for gender equality still goes on. But today, I'm going to focus on gender inequality against women. As feminists all around the world do the best job that they can, I can't help myself thinking how and why, in a big portion of the world, women still can't get equal rights, equal opportunities, or at least equal treatment after all of these remarkable efforts. Why 35% of women globally, which is equal to 1.5 billion women, experience sexual violence. How over 60 million girls worldwide are child brides, married before the age of 18. And how over 600 million women still have to live in countries where domestic violence is not yet considered a crime. Just in the country where I'm from, in 327 days, 253 women were killed due to the violence against women. As humanity, we have progressed in gender equality. It's undeniable. But another thing that's undeniable is the fact that there's still room for progress. And to me, as feminists, we miss out on something really important, which can help our cause. We know that gender equality can't be achieved only by the efforts of women. However, to convince people who are unfamiliar with the severity of gender inequality, women are put into a position where they must be the ones that lead the society. The rate of women who don't identify as an advocate for women's rights is concerning in many countries. A survey conducted by Populous Data Solution found that only 1 in 10 young British women took part in a demonstration, event, or protest in 2018. In the same year, a survey conducted by YouGov asked British youth, do you think that there's still a need for feminism? And 25% of the female pollers believe that there is no need for feminism, followed by 19% of undecided answers. The reason why British women agree that feminism is not needed isn't because women disagree with gender equality. It's because there's a common perception that implies feminism is unnecessary, considering women mostly have the same rights as men, especially in developed countries. And a portion of women are still affected by these false perspectives. It is true that the United Kingdom is doing quite a good job in gender parity. However, the sexism that is normalized, which women face in their daily lives or careers, is an overlooked indicator of gender inequality. So, the fight for gender equality is far from over, even in countries that role model others. In the UK, the pay gap between men and women for full-time workers was 9.1% in 2017. In Turkey, the pay gap goes up to 15%. Of course, there are a variety of problems in gender equality, and in some situations we see much harsher statistics and realities. In cases of domestic and sexual violence, there are surely safety concerns for women. Millions of women live under houses where they're in situations that are really hard to get out of. However, in order to change the status quo, women need to unleash their side, which is fearless and determined. The fight for gender equality starts in our heads. Even though your environment is not yet ready for societal change, you're an important part of it. So first, you should change your mindset and attitude towards sexism. You might ask, is there a way for us to increase the rate of advocacy and unlock the full potential of women's rights movements in every country? I believe that the answer lies within ourselves, and the best method to search ourselves is self-reflection, also called introspection. Self-reflection is when one deliberately pays attention to their own thoughts, emotions, decisions, and behaviors. Self-reflection is asking the question why to improve ourselves, which is the first step for us to improve our communities and achieve a substantial change. Self-reflection is intrinsic to activism, considering activists analyze their past dire experiences and decide to take action accordingly. Let's refer back to the suffrage movement. The suffragettes had their fuel of determination because of the fact that they lived through the same reality as women. They all were seen as second-class citizens. They didn't get the same rights as their male counterparts. So after Emmeline Pankhurst sparked a light in these women's minds, the self-reflection phase started. These women asked themselves, why? Why can't I vote? Why am I treated differently just because of my gender? And most importantly, why am I allowing this to happen? Let's take a look at our status quo. In Iran, women face discrimination in social life, marriage, employment, inheritance, the basic rights that we take for granted. One day, an Iranian woman named Vida Movahed removed her hijab during a public protest. She was sentenced to 1 year in prison, so the Girls of Engulab Street movement started. Fearless Iranian women fought for justice for both Vida Movahed and their reality. After months of protesting, Vida Movahed was pardoned. These women asked themselves the same questions. Why do I not get equal rights? Why is my freedom limited? And most importantly, why aren't I speaking up about this? Self-reflection is not only needed in areas in which women suffer from gender inequality quite brutally. Women across the globe suffer from similar conditions on different intensities, but the determination that these women need can be gained through self-reflection, which is universal. In order for women to join our fight against sexism, women don't need to master gender equality or restlessly analyze statistics. It is true that the statistics are evidence, showing us the severity of problems. But it's important to note that the most valuable evidence is within women, which is their experiences. As an example, we know that women are actively working in jobs everywhere on the globe. And we also know that they have difficulties like sexual harassment in the office, sex segregation, and pay gap. For social change to come one step closer, women need to ask themselves the question why. So the determination for advocacy would come along. There's another aspect of sexism that self-reflection manages to solve that affects every woman, whether they advocate or not, which is internalized sexism. Internalized sexism is the tendency to put down or sabotage other women's success and potential, whether consciously or unconsciously. My view is that internalized sexism mostly affects us women unconsciously, which is why it's harder to recognize and focus on. Examples of internalized sexism would be making self-deprecating jokes based on negative gender stereotypes, self-discouraging yourself in gender stereotypical ways, or somewhat justifying societal, political, or cultural bias and oppression against women. Let me give you some examples that most of you are familiar with. We have all heard of the infamous notion, women can't drive. Even though as women, we definitely shouldn't believe in that, after years of discouragement by society, we start to believe in these ridiculous notions. Another example can be given on sexual harassment. What was she wearing? Or what time was it? Are the questions that are asked frequently to a victim of sexual violence. Like it's going to justify or change anything. After a while, when we are the victim, we start to ask these questions to ourselves. Internalized sexism is being your own oppressor after frequently being affected by gender biases. By putting ourselves down as women, we go backward in our fight against sexism. And the way for us to recognize this toxic behavior is, of course, by self-reflection. Asking whys on the way you behave, think, and believe is an efficient way to recognize and to overcome internalized sexism. To increase the rate of feminists around the world and to improve ourselves as feminists, first, we should get rid of the sexism within ourselves. So, how are we going to embrace this helpful trait, self-reflection? Surprisingly enough, we already use self-reflection in our lives. For instance, when you're stuck in traffic for hours and hours, after a while you ask yourselves, where did I go wrong? All jokes aside, find a comfortable place where you can think in silence. Try to avoid overthinking. Just focus on your past experiences from time to time. Ask questions regarding your past behaviors and thoughts, like why and how. Think about the actions you can take, attending to a conference, donating to a charity, joining a local movement, or spreading positive ideas across. If you have been a victim of sexual or domestic violence, seek help. Acknowledge that there's nothing to be afraid or feel guilty about. After you start to do self-reflection, this habit will spread day by day. Today, you'll start to adopt this habit, then your friends will. You'll free yourself from internalized gender stereotypes that you have been oppressed by and see that there are still things that you can take action on. If humanity can manage to embrace this trait, we'll see that more and more women will become future's activists, doctors, mathematicians, professors, engineers, and politicians. Considering the number of people who vote and advocate for these policies to be implemented will increase, gradually more gender parity laws will be implemented. These gender parity laws will work much more efficiently since laws work the best when it's in harmony with the majority. For a world like this ongoing fight against sexism needs you. So listen very closely to what you really feel about gender equality. Know your value and ask yourselves, what am I waiting for?